All right, welcome back to Dad's Financial Corner. My name is Fook, the proud dad of two rambunctious little boys, figuring out family finances for my family and for yours. I thought I'd go back to one of the basics for financial planning today and some of the most common mistakes I see people make with it. I think most people paying attention to their personal family finances knows by now that the one thing you need to have is an emergency fund. Now, what is an emergency fund? Well, it's also known by a couple other names. If you're a business, maybe you'd call it cash reserve. If you're a poker player, it's known as a nut. For a startup or VC, you know it as runway. And if you're a spy, it's your burn package. Basically, it's the money you have put away for your necessary expenses when you don't have the income stream or cash flow to cover those expenses. Sometimes that could be for unexpected expenses like your car or your hot water heater breaking down. Maybe it's because your job suddenly let you go because of, say, I don't know, a pandemic. Maybe that emergency fund basically buys you time to get things financially back in order so that you and your family don't need to suffer during that time. Common advice is have stash away in an interest earning savings account 3 to 6 months of expenses ready to use in case of an emergency. Assuming you've already figured out your budget to put together an emergency fund, here are the four biggest mistakes I've seen people make even after getting an emergency fund together. If you haven't yet gotten your budget figured out, I'll be talking about that in a future episode. Now, the first big mistake I frequently see is that people aren't treating their emergency fund like an emergency fund. Emergency funds are for worst case scenarios, like when you lose a job for an extended period of time or when your transmission goes out and your car is your primary mode of transportation for work. Your emergency funds are not for when you see a cool new gadget or an awesome outfit that you just have to have. Nor, sadly, is it for paying for your dream vacation. And it's not even for paying for your kid's birthday party, even though he really, really deserves it. I've even heard people tell me that their emergency funds are mixed in with their other savings accounts for big purchases. Or worse yet, they include it in their regular checking account. That's just a no no. Now, the next big mistake people often make with their emergency funds is that they don't put the appropriate amount for their family situation or expenses into this fund. Usually, it's because the work wasn't done to figure out the family budget to understand what the necessary monthly expenses are. So they end up picking some random number just out of the air and assuming that it's going to be enough. But until you know your budget, you can't know if you actually have 3 to 6 months of funds saved away, which in turn leaves your family more vulnerable than you'd probably like. Now, mistake number three that I often see surprisingly is the exact opposite, where people are putting too much into their emergency funds. Usually, this happens because they started off doing the right thing to build up their funds, which is regularly putting money away into their savings every month automatically. Now, the problem is that even when they reached an appropriate amount, they didn't stop. I mean, I've helped people who were so proud of their emergency funds because they had socked away $150,000 plus, even though they actually only needed about 16 or maybe 20,000 for 6 months of expenses. Now, this doesn't sound like such a horrible thing on the face of it, but the reason why it's one you need to avoid is because that money is just sitting in a savings account earning less than 1% nowadays. And that means one, all that money is losing out to inflation, and two, it's not going to work for you in a more effective investment where you could be earning many times the rate of that savings account on average. The last mistake I see is one of the most easily overlooked, and that's forgetting to review your emergency fund on a regular basis. For most people, every other year is probably enough, just to see if your situation has changed and perhaps your expenses or needs have gone up or down. In either case, you'll need to decide to make adjustments to the emergency fund, either by adding additional savings or by taking out some of those funds for investing elsewhere more effectively. Now, there's been some debate as to whether you should be investing your emergency funds in something like an index fund so it can grow instead of keeping it in a savings account, because you're losing out on so much of the market gains by doing so. And I can see where perhaps there are scenarios where this can make sense for some situations, such as a household where the monthly expenses are relatively very, very small compared to the household cash flow or relative to the amount of other assets and investments available. Now, these kinds of situations make the loss from most likely emergencies not as impactful, which is why you can possibly get away with it. But I'll give you one reason why I think it's not such a great idea for the most part. Basically, If you are investing your money in something that is not guaranteed, that inherently means there's a possibility of loss. So if your emergency fund ever came up during a downturn in the market, you'd have to draw from your investments when they are at a low, meaning you'd have to realize that loss instead of being able to wait for your investment to recover. You'd be put into a tough spot of needing your money but not wanting to take it out. You have to remember the two main purposes an emergency fund serves is one, liquidity, and two, safety for your money when you absolutely need it. Alrighty, that's it for today. These are the top mistakes I've seen. But what about you guys? Did I miss anything? I know I've committed at least two or three of these mistakes before. So don't be scared to share about your own mistakes. If you have any questions or want to show your support for Dad's Financial Corner, please be sure to comment below or shoot me an email at dadsfinancialcorner@gmail.com. And it would be great if you could help out Dad's Financial Corner channel by clicking that like and subscribe button below. Until next time, I hope this helps all you dads and moms out there looking to make some smart decisions for your family. All right.